Welcome one and all to episode 25 of Titan Teatime. I'm one of your hosts, Petter, and with me I got my co-host, James.
Domo.
And today, we're talking about our top 10 favorite characters, or top 13 in a way, because we figured we wanted to have, we couldn't just leave it at 10. We need some, we gave ourselves space for honorable mentions, and we each have 3 of those that we're going to mention a bit, But essentially, we're going to share our top 10 lists. And if you're listening to us on YouTube right now, please share your top 10 lists of your favorite Attack on Titan characters in the comments. It would be great to see, different people's takes on that. But let's start with the honorable mentions real quick. So, do you want to mention your honorable mention? Or your first honorable mention, James?
Sure. Just a quick note about at least how I did my honorable mentions.
Yes.
These 3 characters were ones that left an impact on me as I read the story, but I don't know if I put them even in the top 13 per se. Maybe they would.
Ah, okay, fair enough.
And they're definitely not in any order of what I chose. But they could have been the top 13. But anyway.
Gotcha.
So the first one for me is Sasha.
Oh, okay. Nice.
The perfect joke character. Even had some character growth. She was such a joy to watch in any comedic scene she had, with Mikasa or Historia, or her hijinks with Connie and John. It was great to see her. And then that moment in season 2 where she saves Kaya and just kind of gives a little backstory for her. While it's not essential to the story, it was great for her character, I think. And I guess in the end, Isayama did kind of tie what she did there to another story thread with Kaya and Gabby and all that. So that I think that was very great of him. So anyway, I think all of that led to an impactful death for Sasha.
Oh yes.
And I think for me is a character that worth mentioning.
Absolutely. I don't have her in my honorable mentions, but I do agree that it's like, for me anyway, like, sure, I agree with about the comedy stuff and all that, absolutely. But the best thing about her character, in my opinion, is her death in a way. I mean, or rather, what her death gave way for. That whole thing, as you mentioned, with Kaya and Sasha's father and that family and all.
Yeah.
One of the most beautiful parts of the whole story, in my opinion, and it all turned into what it became thanks to Sasha dying. It's kind of morbid to talk about it that way, maybe, but yeah.
Well, you're absolutely right.
So let me share one of my 3 honorable mentions, and I'm going to start with Hanji Zoe. Also a great comedic character, and this was one I had a really hard time not putting them on the top 10, but ultimately I had to push them down to the honorable mentions. But a great comedic character, one of my favorite mad scientists in any story. Like, as far as mad scientists go, Hanji is way up there. Absolutely lovely. And also I have, like, for the latter part of the story, I have so much respect for them trying to find a peaceful solution to the whole conflict, like being so adamant about really trying. They didn't succeed, but just the sheer willpower and dedication in trying there, I think it's very commendable. And I think promoting Armin to being the next Survey Corps commander was one of their smartest moves, ever, because that, even though Armin in position of Survey Corps commander wasn't really crucial, but Hanji's reason for promoting Armin specifically, being that he has the capability of understanding people so well, or like something along those lines, if I recall. That was ultimately the reason why Armin was able to help stop the rumbling, because he was able to understand Zeke and to relate to Zeke and help Zeke get to that realization that he had to stop the rumbling as well.
Yeah. Once the rumbling started, Hanji basically saved Levi and got the alliance together, and really was the one trying to get things going. I mean, all of them were, but if it wasn't for Hanji, I don't think it would have worked out as it did.
Yeah, definitely. And actually, on that note, I'll just go ahead with my next honorable mention, actually.
Sure.
Because it's someone who played a very similar role as Hanji during that part of the story, and it's Theo Magath.
Ah, nice.
So you know why I love him, and especially it was his growth over the chapters that we started covering, kind of, when we started our podcast back in, well, we started with 119, and it wasn't too long after that Magath really started to admit that Eldians aren't devils. They aren't worse than other people. They aren't different. Besides the fact that they can turn into Titans, they are just the same. And that's something that I always, I think he basically, ever since the story started, his story started with, the beginning of the Marley arc, I think he always, at least ever since then, did respect Eldians. It's just he struggled with admitting it to himself, but also to others, just because it's something he was raised with as being something very wrong. But he had been working very closely with Eldians for 2 decades or so before the Marley arc starts. So I think during that long time he would have gotten used to them and gotten to see just how they really are just regular people. And I know we've talked about this on the podcast before, or at least I have, about just how there are several little hints throughout the Marley arc about him, showing the Eldians kindness, and he respects them much more than any other non-Eldian does, which I think is the main reason why I love him so much. And he's also kind of a funny character sometimes, not as much as Sasha or Hanji, but I just wanted to bring some light to the scene in the pretty much it's early in the Marley arc after the battle, and there's a scene where Zeke and Colt are talking, and Zeke is talking about his secret, Colt would learn his secret when he when he inherits his Titan, and Colt is like, your secret? Zeke says, about the way I wipe my ass. It's special. I hope you keep it to yourself. And then Magath comes into the scene just out of nowhere and it's it's too late. You're telling me everything. A full report down to the number of hairs on your ass. It's so funny. It's so funny. He's able to joke around with these Eldians in that kind of way. Is that in and of itself is awesome. But also, yeah, he's really funny. In that kind of just, it's he's funny with a serious tone, and I think that makes it even funnier. But anyway, that's my ramble on Magath.
Yeah, I'm definitely not a Magath lover per se. I respect the character that he was and the role that he played, and I think that I grew to admire him more, especially in that role as kind of a leader of the younger generation up to his death. That was very good, in his kind of acceptance of Eldians not being the monsters that he was raised to believe and all that. And so anyway, and understanding that, I guess asking for forgiveness for what he's done. But anyway, it was great to see that change in him. I thought the death was a good one.
Yeah.
And I think that overall it was a nice character. He was a nice character.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Actually, my next honorable mention, it ties in with Magath, actually.
All right, perfect.
My next one is Willie Tiber.
Oh.
I pick Willie because while his role in the Marley arc is very important, it's also kind of short,
Yeah.
In the grand scheme of things. But I think that role that he plays is so important for moving the plot the way it goes, for, I guess, giving motivation to Aaron's character, to Magath, to basically the entire world. And I think, without Willie Tiber there, you probably wouldn't have spiraled in the way that it did.
Yeah.
So for an antagonist in the plot of Attack on Titan, Willie Tiber nailed it, and he was the perfect antagonist for the Marley arc, I think.
I don't even like to call him an antagonist, though.
Well, that's fair. But I mean, I think no offense, I think some people are cut up with the idea of antagonist means like villain and like evil bad guy.
Fair.
He's not an evil bad guy. He obviously has his own views and guilt about what the Eldian people have done in the past.
For sure.
But in this story, I'd say he was the antagonist to Parody and Eren.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right about that. As for the story as a whole, he is, or he was. Mm-hmm. But with the Marley arc, which was where he appeared, the Marley arc's perspective is different. It's from the other side. So I'd say from the Marley arc's perspective, he is not an antagonist.
I can see what you're saying. Yeah, I guess I was really looking at a whole, not just the arc itself.
Fair, totally fair.
But he revealed some truths through that play, but he also used that truth for his own gain in getting the world to get on his side in order to fight against the people Parody. So yeah, I thought he was a very interesting character with an ability to persuade others to follow him.
Oh yes.
And that just made me admire him.
Absolutely, I agree completely. And actually, Willie Tiber is my final honorable mention as well. So I was happy to see you had him too.
Great.
And I mean, I he's there on my list for all the same reasons, and also he was kind of raised, like his upbringing allowed him to have all these connections to all these high-standing people from around the world. So that was like super important,
right,
for the mission that he took on in his final days there. And I don't know, it's like I admire him so much for his, like, the courage that he had to do all that, to reveal the Tiber family secret that had been hidden for 100 years, all about that, how about the Great Titan War actually ended, which is honestly a bit shameful for his family as a whole. And to do that, I think, is a great thing for him to take on.
Right.
But yeah, I was happy to see him on your honorable mentions as well.
My last honorable mention is Carla Yeager.
Oh, nice.
I really like Carla.
Yes.
Because of the messages that she brought to the story. You know, Eren was special because he was born to this world, and how much she loved him. And her death was really the catalyst to a lot of what happened in Attack on Titan.
Oh yeah.
And obviously we now have the foresight, a little more foresight, into what actually caused her death. But even that was because Eren supposedly was the one that allowed that Titan to eat her. But without that death happening, it probably wouldn't have led to Eren seeking out revenge against the Titans, and et cetera, et cetera. So her character's death was very important, but also when we get her backstory, it just really showed what a wonderful person she was, and the perfect mother for Eren.
Yeah, she's so great.
And I also really love her design. She's beautiful.
Oh yes, absolutely.
I guess I can thank Wit for that, but still. I mean, Isayama did a really good job with her, not gonna lie. But obviously Wit kind of took it up a notch.
True. No, absolutely. We know where Eren got his good looks from.
Yeah, definitely was his dad. I mean, debatable. I think some people actually think like Grisha's look.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Their own, I guess.
Yeah, he's handsome. Anyway, yeah, I think that's a splendid pick, and I wish I could have had room for her as well in mine, but she sadly isn't there. But yeah, good stuff. And just to make things clear, I think these three honorable mentions we mentioned here aren't in any particular order for either of us, right?
Yeah.
They're just there in whatever order. But coming up, our top 10 lists going from 10 to 1 will be in order. And I guess I'll start with mine. So my number 10 is Historia Rice.
What? Okay, that's surprising. That is really surprising.
I would have loved to put her higher on the list. As you know. Or as probably anyone who's listened to our podcast before knows. Yes, she used to be in my top 5 somewhere. But just I guess the ending just didn't quite leave me fulfilled, sadly. I think she really, really shined in the Clash of the Titans arc and the Uprising arcs. Like, she was arguably the main character of those. Like, not the only one, surely, but she was definitely one of the absolute most prominent characters in those two arcs, especially the Uprising arc, of course, but even in the
particularly Uprising, yeah.
Yeah, but also very much, I think, in the Clash of the Titans arc as well, with her and Ymir, and kind of their relationship that they had going and all that was really... It's one of the most interesting character relationships I've seen probably in any medium, is Historia and Ymir. I wish I could have put Ymir on this list too. I had her... she was so close to making it into my honorable mentions, but ultimately I couldn't fit her in there. But just those two characters together are so awesome, and anyway, like Historia's whole life and I guess the parallels, with Ymir the founder, and how even since she was a child, she tried to be like the ancient Ymir, try to be this kind, almost like goddess type person. Obviously not like the real Ymir, or not, well, at least the book she read wasn't completely accurate, of course, to the real events, but the way she interpreted it and the way she learned about it, that's how she tried to act for quite a while in her life. And yeah, I don't know, she just has a really fascinating backstory and story in the manga itself too. I love her. Just kind of wish she could have, we could have gotten some kind of better payoff at the end, because that could have put her maybe even in my top 3. I really like her.
I agree. Her end was a bit lukewarm. I've said this multiple times, but I do think her story did end well. That was the end of her arc. When the Uprising arc ended, I think that was where her story basically ended. Obviously, she still had a role to play, and she was an important piece in the whole who's going to get Zeke's Beast Titan, and parody, trying to get that going.
Right.
But yeah, I felt like that her character arc had basically stopped there. But at the same time, it does kind of feel a little like a waste of potential that she doesn't really get much more than just being pregnant.
Exactly.
for the end of the story.
Yeah.
She doesn't really have any last crucial moments besides maybe the letter she writes to Armin.
Right, that was really the only thing we got from the final chapter.
That's about it.
Yeah. Oh well. I still love her though. Like, all things considered, definitely.
Sure.
So, do you have a number 10? Well, of course you do. But
I don't have a number 10.
You started.
I don't believe in the number 10. Okay, so my number 10 is Peak.
Yay!
I didn't really think much of Peak actually when I first read the Marley arc. But similar to some other characters, when I reread the Marley arc, I grew in a greater appreciation for her. And then as the new chapters dropped, I was paying more attention to her. I was like, wow, I actually really like Peak and her attitude and just her mentality throughout this. Yeah, she could come off as a little too chill may not be the right word. I think at the beginning of the Marley arc, she was very laid back, look-ish. Although you could argue she was just more tired than anything.
Yeah, maybe she was just really sleepy.
Really sleepy. But as that arc went forward and you went into the War for Parity, is that the next arc after that?
Yes.
You go into that arc and she kind of has the moment where she points the finger at Eren. That leading up to that was great.
Yeah.
I think it's that mentality that really made me a fan of Peak. Besides, I did notice that she was really cute.
Oh yes.
but it's that in that finger pointing moment, and with Gabby, she mentions that I don't really particularly like Marley. I know they've been using us, but I'm gonna side with the people I can trust, like my comrades. And I really like that message, or just that choice that she makes. I thought it was a very good choice. It wasn't blindly serving her country. Yeah. It was more serving the people that she knows.
Exactly. Actually, I wanted to comment real quick on that, because
Sure.
It was when I first read that part of that chapter the first time, and saw her say that, was when I kind of realized that, yeah, that's exactly where I stand, at least at that point in Attack on Titan. That's kind of, because I didn't fully root for Parody, and I didn't fully root for Marley either, and I had grown so fond of the characters in the Marley arc that I really like that was where my loyalties, or like kind of where I was rooting the most as well. Like really,
traitor. I'm kidding.
Yeah, but I could like really relate to her when she said that. I thought it was really great.
Right. It's one of the few character moments she gets. The reason why she's 10 is because she doesn't have as many moments as some of the other characters.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, but again, as the chapters went on, you saw some really cool action scenes with her. You saw how kind of witty she could be, and some great one-liners.
Yeah.
Like "be gone" or whatever she says to Eren when she tries to blow the head up. Whatever, it was pretty great.
Yeah.
Then the anime, I think, really solidified her in my top 10. Just her design was great. Her voice was amazing.
Yes.
And I just think, she's just adorable and deserved to be a top 10. Obviously, my list is going to be very biased in terms of waifus. So bear with me.
So now you know what to expect from James's list.
Hey,
I don't judge.
Wait, we were doing a top 10 waifus list? Oh,
hey, maybe we'll do that someday. Oh yeah, that's great though. Great pick.
Peak.
I guess I'll move on with my number 9. It is Eren Yeager.
Number 9. Nice.
Yes.
Cool.
I guess in the beginning of the story, I was always one of those who actually liked him. Even in the beginning, when I remember hearing a lot of people complaining about his character, that he was just whiny and screamy and stuff like that. And that he just sucked, that he was just bad at everything. Personally, I really enjoyed that. I loved following along with his failures and his struggles and his doubts in himself, which came along a little bit later. Like, all of that was something that I really enjoyed in him as a main character in the beginning of the like the first half of the story or so. Really enjoyed that part, especially starting in the Uprising arc, when he started to really have more doubts and he started to lose some confidence in himself, especially then. But even before then, when he was just kind of a bad in terms of not succeeding a lot main character, I thought I kind of enjoyed that, just because it wasn't what we're used to necessarily. He's definitely not a Gary Stu or a Mary Sue or whatever you want to call it.
Right.
He's never been that, and I really value him for that, among other things. And then from the Marley arc onward, he became this really interesting, mysterious character suddenly. And I think I've talked about this as well before, how the story leading up to the end of the Return to Shiganshin arc, we basically see everything through Eren's eyes. We know everything Eren knows, and the world is the mystery. Meanwhile, when the Marley arc starts, we suddenly know so much more about the world, so the world isn't really mysterious in that way anymore, but Eren himself becomes the mystery at that point. So that I love that switch in his character and the perspective on that whole thing.
Yeah.
And of course, I gotta mention as well, like, even though I don't agree with his actions that ended the whole story, I enjoy him very much just as a fictional character, hence why he's on my top 10 list, and definitely one of my favorite main characters in a manga or anime.
For sure. For a main character, he is unique in that he doesn't have this happy-go-lucky kind of attitude all the way towards the end, and his growth is just different from other main characters. It's a little more cynical, I guess you could say.
Yeah. So your number 9?
My number 9 is Gabby, or Gabi, however it's supposed to be pronounced.
Right.
I mean, obviously this is a controversial one, probably one of the most controversial ones in the fandom.
Probably, sadly.
Yeah. But talk about character growth. I didn't hate her guts for killing Sasha or Eren, or even her attitude in general. I was actually found her quite charming. Well, before the whole killing Sasha. But even then, I was, did you have to do that? Like, I understand why you would kill someone, but did it have to be her? Anyway, I still grew to appreciate her slow growth as she tried to understand that the Eldians weren't devils. I mean, well, people on parody weren't devils.
Yeah.
They're innocent people. And her time with Kaya and seeking forgiveness was a warm moment during the chaos that was happening, with the rumbling and all that. So I found her cute, really funny, and her desire for forgiveness and also just to change herself is relatable, I think, to all of us. And sometimes maybe in our life, we've had moments where we maybe mistreated someone or a way of thinking, and that was wrong of us. So being able to change how we were born or how we were raised to think, and making a difference, seeking forgiveness is really admirable, I think, and Gabby's a good example of that. And yeah, I love Gabby and Falco's relationship, and found it very wholesome.
Absolutely, yeah. I think those two together are definitely two of the most wholesome characters in the story.
Right.
Yeah, great pick. So, I guess moving on to my number 8 is someone you've already mentioned. It's Peak Finger. So I got her on my list too. She's just such a likable character and person.
Yeah.
Like, so quirky and funny and smart and the whole package. But
very true.
I think something other than I think you put it very nicely before, and I agree with all of the things you said about her then, but something I can add to that is that I think her role in the Marley arc was a lot about, well, because of her being as likable as she is, because I think a lot of us, obviously not everyone, but I think a lot of us can agree on that. She is very, very likable. And I think thanks to that, she was able to kind of fill a role of making readers or watchers of the anime find a new character in this new cast of characters that they could enjoy, that they could get behind. Because in this new cast of characters, like, most of them are brand new, first of all, which makes it a little bit hard, I guess, with that perspective shift. Because I think that was a bold move of Isayama in the first place to go the route he did with the beginning of the Marley arc. I love him for it, but it was definitely a bold move. It was a cast of brand new characters for the most part. We had Reiner and Zeke that we knew since before, but they were villains, at least as things were perceived earlier.
Right.
They were antagonists for sure. So that made things difficult. But with a character like Peak, who is so fun and nice and cute and quirky and just enjoyable as a character, I think that was really smart of Isayama to add her in that kind of way, because it would help people maybe get a liking for this new cast of characters a little bit easier.
So what you're saying is she was the waifu, the new waifu for everybody. Like,
I think that's very true. I think that turned out to be the case in a lot of instances. Yes. That is what I'm saying. So, but yeah, that's all I had to add on Peak as my number 8. So
great.
Anything you want to say there, or do you want to go on to your number 8?
No, I totally agree with what you're saying about Peak, and I've already mentioned my thoughts on her, but
for sure.
So my number 8 is Annie.
All right, nice.
And I'll be honest though, I really struggled with placing her. She almost didn't make the list, which is funny that she'd be number 8 and she didn't make the list. But I did a lot of thinking, and I did some rearranging towards the bottom of the list.
Gotcha, yeah.
And Annie, for me, when I first watched the series, the moment where they find out that she's the female Titan, it was so impactful. I remember being like, oh, I bet she's the female Titan. Like, there's no other female character that we know that she could be.
Yeah.
And that's fine, though, because the way they went about it and the way they animated it and how Isayama told that story was so fantastic that when you get to Annie's laugh after being found out, it just sends chills down your spine. And then that fight where Eren is just like, why are you like that? Nah, wait, let me take that back. Why are you doing this? It's so gut-wrenching.
Yeah.
And then his rage after that, you feel that rage.
Yeah.
Now, I know some people can't forgive Annie, similar to Gabby, for what she did. But I think it's the same kind of mindset. Annie was raised the way she was to kill Eldians, to kill the people on Parody. And she was trained to be a killer, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
And so, obviously, her actions in the Female Titan arc are going to be pretty aggressive, pretty violent.
Of course, yeah.
but I think when she finally gets out of the crystal, I mean, that's one... Having to wait so long was pretty painful, not going to lie. But when she finally gets out of the crystal, we see that change in her mindset where she feels that guilt, or at least acknowledges that guilt. Now, she struggles to accept that and to put into words, but I admire that change in her, and again, I appreciate that perspective.
For sure.
And of course, I was a big Annie Armin shipper.
Yes.
So I liked that dynamic they had towards the end there, and it was very cute. And yeah, I think if people can forgive Reiner and Gabby, they can forgive Annie.
Oh yes, absolutely.
I think they both went through guilt for the things they did and tried to make up for it.
Totally agree. Speaking of what you touched on at the beginning there about kind of the reveal of her being the female Titan, I've heard all sorts of kind of stories about how people, well, their thought processes as to like speculating who could the female Titan be, and like, so I really talked to all sorts of people on that kind of thing. So I know like there's some people that figured it out in the having watched the anime the first for this part the first time. I remember I did basically figure out it was her in the first episode that we saw the female Titan in.
I know that butt anywhere.
Right. Exactly. But I also know others who, they didn't figure it out until it was, revealed, in the actual story, which is totally fair.
Right. It was a good reveal. Surprise.
Right. I'm sure it was for a lot of people. It's just like my issue with it, my first time through, was the fact that I basically figured it out right away. Made me think that, oh, this is going to be a really predictable anime. That was like my first impression of Attack on Titan. Oh, this is just one of those really predictable shows. Turns out I was way wrong, of course. But I just think it's kind of funny to laugh at.
Yeah.
But yeah, I guess in regard to Annie, I've been able to predict things much better than I usually have. Like I basically never get my predictions fulfilled. But with Annie, I did that with that one at the beginning and at the end, where with the walls were crumbling, and I predicted that would also make her crystal crumble.
Oh yeah,
I did get that too, and that's also regarding her. But I think that those might be the only two actual like solid predictions that I've gotten right.
So what you're saying is Annie is just very predictable. What a predictable person.
Maybe to me anyway. I don't know. Anyway, great character, great, lovely girl. So my number 7 is none other than Zeke Jaeger. He grew on me a lot, like really throughout, like since his appearance and all the way until the end. He kind of steadily grew on me in various ways. He was really, at least for the most part, in the beginning especially, he really was this character that I just kind of loved to hate.
Yeah.
And there was just so much mystery about him, especially since in the beginning we only see him as, in his Beast Titan form. And then of course, moving on way further into the story, after we actually know more about his character, we learned about his backstory, about his childhood, and about how awful his parents were to him as he grew up. And like from that point on, I really, really, really started liking him. Like that was really like a turning point for me in regards to his character, where I really enjoyed his character from that point on, and it continued growing even more from that. From there, the chapters with him and Eren in Paths, for example, was also a really, really interesting kind of reveal on his personality and on his character. To see just how how much he cared about Eren in that, in my opinion, rather twisted way. Like, he didn't have that much reason to care so deeply about his half brother, but he did, and that was really fascinating to follow along with, and as I said, yeah, to really get to know the real Zeke, I think we really started to do for the first time in the past chapters. I mean, the childhood backstory was also crucial, of course, but like getting to know the current Zeke is what we really got to do in the past chapters with Eren, and then of course there was also the paths part with Armin at the very end of the story, kind of. And like their conversation, their interaction was also like one of my favorite interactions in the story, probably. Just beautiful how Zeke was able to kind of find reason for life to go on, essentially, was so beautiful, and for him to ultimately sacrifice himself to kill the rumbling, or to end the rumbling, was great.
It really was. I think he had a lot of closure, and it was fantastic to see him talk it out with Armin and come to that conclusion.
Yeah,
I agree with you that over time he definitely grew on me as a character, much more than just the monkey that he started off as, you know,
for sure,
the big beast titan.
Yeah.
Which, speaking of, it's almost poetic that my number 7 is Levi.
Oh, great.
You know, the ultimate antagonist for the Beast Titan.
Oh yes.
The eternal fight. He's just too cool not to have on this list for me. I'm not usually one to gravitate towards the super cool, you know, OP characters. At least I don't feel like I am. But I don't know, there's just something about Levi and his role in the story that I really liked. And obviously his scenes where he just wrecks titans, whether in the forest or the Beast Titan, is fantastic.
Yeah.
You gotta love it.
Absolutely.
I like his origin story. It's not one of my favorite backstories, but I think it's very good. But for me, it was the female Titan arc. I think that's a female Titan arc, where he lost his close comrades.
Yeah.
Due to Annie attacking, and Petra's death at that moment, and then when he goes to the village and meets her father, or sees her father.
Yeah.
It made me pay closer attention to him. Besides all the great advice and leadership he was giving Eren, like he kind of became a mentor figure. But it was also that moment with Petra that you see that emotion, that he potentially that was someone that he was going to spend his life with.
Maybe.
So, it kind of added a tragic note to his OP character that we see throughout his journey. All of his friends die. All my friends are dead.
Yes.
All my comrades die. It is basically how it is. But what really solidified his number 7 spot for me was that final chapter where he does that salute to, I guess, the spirits or the apparitions of his comrades. That was so powerful.
It really was.
So I had to put him in my top 10.
Nice. Yeah. Yeah. He really is great. I think he's one of those characters that he is really popular with a lot of people, probably mostly for his like coolness. But yes, like but there is so much more to him as well, as you mentioned. I'm usually not a big fan of those sorts of characters either, that are just like they're just so good at everything. But what makes Levi into a really good character is kind of also what you said there about how, or interesting at least, how he continues to not really be able to protect his comrades. Like he's always often he is the only one left standing. And I mean, he is the only one out of the like original Survey Corps that survived till the end of the story.
It's true.
He is really the ultimate survivor, along with Reiner. Those two.
Yeah.
They'll never die.
Those two. Plot armor. I failed to mention this, but his kind of trust and relationship with Erwin was also very powerful. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that. I think that was obviously an important part to Levi's character.
Yes.
Growth. But I guess that goes along with the comrade part.
Right. Yeah. No, for sure. Absolutely. Great pick. And I guess this segues nicely into my number 6, sort of. Another Ackerman. It's Mikasa Ackerman. In my number 6 spot.
Nice.
Yes.
Nice segue.
Thank you. Thank you. It just worked out. Mikasa was my favorite character after I'd only watched the first season of the anime.
Understandable.
She became my favorite character pretty much right away because she was just so cool. Like, I was just...
Right.
Yeah, she was like the coolest ever. I just couldn't help but adore her. I think I may have changed, like I may have changed a bit since then in terms of what types of characters I tend to gravitate to. I still really enjoyed that part in the story. I really enjoy her part in that story still, or her part in that part of the story. But I lost interest in her at some point after the first season. And for a pretty long time, I just didn't really find enough in her that spoke to me. So she kind of became sadly became a character that I didn't care for too much. She had her moments, from time to time. After season 1, she would have some moments that I would really enjoy, such as her outburst of emotions, in Return to Shiganshina, when she and Eren were both getting a bit too worked up, or maybe not too worked up, but they were getting very worked up over, they had to save Armin,
Right.
So seeing her that way in that scene was one of the highlights amidst this longer period where I just didn't see too much interesting with her. However, like the last volume or so of the story, I thought portrayed her really, really well. I remember shortly before that, when they were still kind of on parody, and it was kind of still, it was the climax was starting, but they hadn't left parody yet. I remember at that point, and this was also part of our old episode discussions, I remember I didn't really... I was confused. I was confused as to where Isayama was taking her, and I was worried that it wouldn't lead anywhere, because it just, at the time, it felt strange. But it really paid off at the end. Like, I think Isayama was able to conclude her story really, really, really nicely. Surprisingly so. I did not expect it, honestly, because I had sort of lost hope a little bit in her character. But
you doubted? No,
I did. I know. I kept saying, "In Isayama we trust."
You were unworthy of that phrase.
Yeah.
I'm kidding. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, right. But yeah, no. She was. Her story was ended terrifically, and I didn't think for a while. I didn't think she would make it to my top 10 list onto here, but she did. She made the 6th spot. So
awesome. Yeah,
that is awesome.
Great. I agree with you that she kind of plays a backseat role in the story after that first season of the anime. And she obviously has her moments, but they're not as strong as that first season. So I don't blame people for kind of not paying attention to her as much, or not finding her as interesting anymore, because there were other characters that kind of took the spotlight and just were more important to the story right there. But I'm glad she was able to make your top 6 at the very least.
Yeah.
My top 6 is a different waifu. Not the Eren Mikasa ship, but the Eren Historia ship.
All right.
No, I don't ship them, but Historia was an incredibly strong character during part of season 2, in my opinion, but mostly in season 3, at least the first half of season 3, where she had the moment with her father, but also where she takes the role as queen of parody. And I don't know, I thought her growth from letting go maybe the wrong word, parting with Ymir to becoming the crown ruler was just so great and strong that you can't ignore her. And she was, like you said, probably kind of the main focus of the story at that point.
Yeah.
And something that you kind of touched on, but I just want to emphasize more, is her backstory.
Right.
I think that backstory just puts her characters into perspective so much, and just her growing up the way she did, seeing the tragedy that befell her, it kind of helps you understand her mindset of not, kind of hiding behind the facades of Krista. That was the name, right?
Yeah, Crystal Lens.
Hiding behind that, and then eventually accepting the person that she is, and accepting the fact that she is royalty. So yeah, I like that about her, and she was very important for Eren as well, as a friend.
Exactly.
I think that without her pushing him towards a certain way, and basically, slapping in the face in metaphorical speak, because I don't think she actually does that, but she basically helped him get into a better mindset. So without her character, Eren would probably have been dead anyway. Well, actually, a lot of people could say that.
True.
Eren had a lot of moments where he almost died. So
He
anyway,
definitely did, yeah.
Didn't mean to take away from Historia, but Historia is a great girl. I can see why so many people love her.
Yeah. My favorite Attack on Titan figurine is of Historia.
Nice.
Out of the ones I have.
So, did I just put Historia higher on my list than yours?
Yeah, you did.
Wow.
Yeah, you did.
Didn't see that coming.
No, neither did I, actually. But hey, that's interesting. That's fun. That's fun. I guess she sunk more for me, sadly.
That's fair. Well, yeah, of course. And that ending was not ideal for her.
Yeah, sadly not. But hey, at least we both really appreciate her time earlier in the story. Like, her role there was phenomenal. Absolutely.
For sure.
Yeah. So, moving on to my number 5 is Armin Arlert.
Armin!
Yeah, so he's another one who I remember, because I've tried to do like these top 10 lists for Attack on Titan characters before, over the years, kind of, and he hasn't always made it onto my top 10 list, but
wow.
But he ended up here now.
Yeah.
I will say, like, I never disliked him, but
okay,
I didn't care much for him in like almost the first half of the story or so. It took me a while, I think, to really get interested in him, because to me he just felt a little bit bland, I guess, starting off, to me anyway. I think the first time when he really kind of impressed me was in the Uprising arc, when he saved John by shooting Kenny's goon, taking a human life for the first time. That was a really big moment for him, and it wasn't something I had expected at all. So I think that was kind of the first time when he really kind of sparked my interest. And then obviously later on in Return to Shiganshina was fantastic. He made up that whole plan for him and Eren to take down Bertold, and ultimately leading to him basically dying. I mean, he would have died if it wasn't for the serum.
Yeah.
And I will say, even though at this point I had definitely started really caring for him, I loved him for his dreams of, seeing the outside world. That was something I wanted him to see that. And as I said, like, I had started to find him interesting since the Uprising arc, and this plan of his was fantastic and all. So I definitely liked him at that point when he was lying there dying. Yet I still remember in that moment I was definitely rooting for them to save Erwin, even though I did still very much like Armin as well. But yeah, so I wasn't rooting for him to survive there, even though I'm glad he did ultimately, because his role later on in the story, while it was hard to see him kind of being so kind of at a loss for the most part from the Marley arc onward, because he didn't, like, there was a very long time there when he, just like Hanji, just didn't really know how to solve this. Like, they couldn't find a solution. So that was a bit hard to kind of to see that. But I think his story at the very end of it all was just like Mikasa's concluded so nicely that I just had to put him up on the list here. I mentioned his conversation with Zeke earlier when I talked about Zeke. Like, that was such a great moment for both of those characters. Armin to be able to find just the right angle to kind of change Zeke's mind on that, and I think that was a fantastic kind of, not conclusion to his character, but it was definitely, I think, the highlight in his character for me personally. That was where, like, that was his apex for me, because and I mean, he was still great at the end there when he took responsibility for having killed Eren, and all that was great, but yeah, he also had a fantastic conclusion.
Agreed. Obviously that moment with Zeke is very powerful, and I understand that people were kind of debating, like the debate was hot about should Erwin or Armin survive.
Yeah.
I totally understand that.
It's one of the funniest questions to ask people in this fandom, because it's almost a 50-50 split as far as I've seen,
Yeah, it really is. Even here in this podcast, I was definitely Team Armin.
Right.
I think we've had a few discussions / arguments.
Yes, we have
about that. But no, I'm glad to see him at number 5 in your list, and I agree with all your points.
Sweet.
My number 5 is Zeke.
Nice.
Speaking of that conversation, I think that conversation, along with him coming to grips with the joy of living and like living in the moment and finding happiness in life, I think that it really put him at number 5 on my list, and made me think of my own life and how if I have moments where I'm down, it's important to think about the joys of life. Life is kind of a gift, and there's so much that we can enjoy in it. There is pain that comes with it, but there's also a lot of joy in the small, almost meaningless moments. So we just have to, I guess, look for them. And sometimes that can be hard, but I think what Zeke shows is even in your darkest moments, you can find them. And so it's not just that. Obviously, it's also his background character, or not background, his backstory.
Right.
Because before, he was just Monkey Man. He was just the hairy beast titan who sounded like Dio. And
exactly.
I was kind of almost indifferent about him, other than the fact that he seemed like he'd be the next step up from, Bertolt and Reiner. You know what I mean? Like, oh, he's kind of pulling the strings here. Well, what's he all about?
Yeah.
But actually seeing what his character is, what his situation is, and then seeing his reasoning for wanting to euthanize the Eldian people, why he betrayed his parents, and just seeing his point of view, it really helps you put yourself in his shoes and understand where he's coming from, and see that as almost all these characters in this manga, they are human beings. They're not just one-dimensional people.
Right.
They're two-dimensional. No, I'm just kidding. There's more to them than just bad guy, good guy.
Oh yeah.
Kind of thing.
Right.
And that final moment with Zeke before he gets his head cut off in chapter 138 is special. It's definitely one of my favorite moments in the manga.
Yeah. Oh yeah. It's so good. So good. Man, I kind of feel like I should have put him higher on my list now, but I'm not going to make any changes.
Too late.
It's too late now. This is my final list forever.
No, I mean, look, afterwards you can change it if you want.
Can I?
I don't know.
We'll see. But yeah, like he is such a great character. He really is, like, he really had such a steady growth, and like I really found more and more reasons to love him kind of as the story went on. So I thought that was, I mean, obviously, especially from the Marley arc onward. So
yeah, for sure.
But still, it was a very steady growth, and it ended perfectly. One of the best character endings in the series, I'd say.
Yep.
One of them. So, moving on to number 4, I got Gabby Brown.
Oh, well, number 4. Okay.
Yes. Yes.
Dang.
Did you think I would have a list without Gabby Brown?
No. Well, that's true. You hadn't mentioned Gabby yet. That's a good point.
Refresh my mind. What was where did you place her?
Gabby was number 9.
9. Gotcha. So yeah, she's a little higher on my list.
Just a little bit.
I always enjoyed her. I mean, maybe not from the chapter 1 or chapter 91 or 90 or whichever it was she appeared in the first. Maybe I didn't love her from the very start, but I always enjoyed her, and I quickly grew to love her very much in the early parts of the Marley arc. And I was always very sad to see all those Gabby haters in the fandom.
Yeah.
That was something I could not approve of whatsoever. Because really, and I know we've talked about this at length probably on the podcast before, but it's really, given her background, it makes perfect sense for her to have the outlook that she does and to think.
It totally does.
To think the way she does with that kind of brainwashing that she's been through. And it was really sad to see that throughout the story. I mean, she's a really charming and clever and fun person, She's a great person. But then there's these scenes from time to time, especially throughout the Marley arc, where we really get to see how brainwashed she is. And that's really sad to see this 12-year-old girl, how strong of a hatred she has for the parody Eldians. And that, just kind of a really dark side of the story. I mean, there's a lot of dark sides in this story. But that really was one of them, to see this little girl with a mindset like that. But then obviously that really paid off, as we mentioned a little earlier when we talked about Sasha and her death. It all really paid off when Gabby got to meet Kaya and Sasha's father and spend time there. That is probably, or easily, it's easily one of my favorite, I guess, side arcs or mini arcs or whatever you want to call that in this story, is Gabby's time with the Blouse family. Just because of how much she changed, and just basically that 180 about and understanding that Eldy and some parody are no different from any human anywhere on the world. And it's one of the character journeys in this story that touched me the most.
Indeed. And that was all in this, well, I guess you can't say second half, but the later part of the story. Gabby is somewhat new compared to a lot of the characters.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
So to have that great character growth within the amount of chapters that she's in is pretty fantastic. And I agree with you. I think it was great, and the hate that she received, while I understand where some people are coming from, was definitely overdone, in my opinion. But I also really liked her relationship with Reiner.
Yes. Of course.
I think that her respect for him, and then his want to protect her, would also be a mentor and a good is it uncle cousin?
No, they're cousins.
Cousin, a good cousin. Like that's that's it was very wholesome to see that as well.
Yeah. Totally.
Actually, that leads to my number 4.
Oh, nice.
Is Reiner.
My boy.
Yeah. I think if you had asked me before we started doing this podcast what I thought of Reiner, I'd probably be like, "You mean that guy who's the Armored Titan?" I don't know. I mean, I guess that was pretty cool.
Oh man.
Yeah, I was really indifferent about him. Even after I had read the Marley arc, I was kind of just meh. I mean, he's there. I get, okay, we're seeing his side of the story. Okay, let's keep going. Where's Aaron? Where's everybody else? But after, and I know I've said this multiple times, but after rereading the Marley arc and having a discussion on here, I came to a greater appreciation for the kind of tragic character that he became, and it kind of racked with guilt. And just seeing that through his memories, going through his training and the backstory that's there, but also seeing him struggling with that in present time, all the way up to where he puts the gun into his mouth. seeing that is one shocking,
Yeah.
and also very well storyboarded, written, drawn.
Yeah. Oh,
In
absolutely. Yeah.
Isayama's case, but it was impactful, and it gets you caring about Reiner and hoping for him to get out of it okay. And thankfully, he was able to put his I guess future, his hope into Falco and Gabby and them. And I think eventually he also was finally able to find forgiveness, and that really strengthened his character for me, because obviously he was seeking it in a way, but he also knew that he couldn't be forgiven, or he felt like he couldn't be forgiven. So to see him kind of struggle with that, but then eventually receive some sort of forgiveness there was very nice. And then at the very end, he was able to finally forgive himself. I feel like the last chapter, the last few pages are indication of that.
Yes.
And so for me, that just puts a nice bow on his entire story and puts him number 4. Besides the fact that I do think the Armor Titan is pretty cool. And those fight scenes with Eren are some of the best in the series.
Definitely.
Absolutely phenomenal.
Yeah, I agree that I think he definitely was able to forgive himself. Maybe not like 100%, but to a big extent anyway. Like he was able to find a healthy way to live. And I know everyone is hating and laughing at him sniffing the letter from Historia. And I know I've said this before, but I personally actually really, really liked it, because to me, and I think you might agree with this as well, James, like that's a sign that's kind of proof that he's feeling all right. He's back to his goofy self that we knew from the Trost arc, for example, and the Female Titan arc too. He's in a better place now,
totally.
mentally.
Speaking of his goofy self, I failed to mention that before the whole reveal that he was the traitor, I did think he was kind of a goofy but strong guy.
Yeah, right.
He said some funny things, and he was always commenting on Historia. I thought that was pretty funny. But then in season 2 or Clash of Titans, he on the tower, he's protecting everybody. He kind of loses his arm or whatever.
His arm is injured.
Injured is what I meant to say.
Right.
So seeing that, I did kind of create sort of feelings is the wrong word, but I was like, oh, this guy's pretty cool. This guy's a good guy.
Right.
And then the reveal happened. It's like, oh wow, that's a great reveal. Although I don't remember if I was like, oh yeah, it's pretty obvious who it is. I can't remember.
To me, it was not at all.
Yeah.
I think Annie's to me was, but Reiner and Bertolt's, I did not see that coming at all.
Yeah.
So I guess we are down to our top 3.
Here we go.
So my number 3 is Erwin Smith.
Aha.
So I always, from the beginning of the story, from his initial appearances, I always thought he was cool, but not really outstanding necessarily right off the bat. He was this cool leader type characters. He did the job of being a leader, but there wasn't too much, in the very earliest parts. There were a few little hints at some type of, or that got me intrigued. There's one that's kind of been made into a meme where he's like behind Eren and he's like, "What do you see? Like, tell me what you see." Like, and like,
I love that.
That was a part of the story, or with his character, that I guess I started wondering. Like, I started becoming more curious about him, I guess. And then we saw kind of how his gamble in the woods when they were being chased by the Female Titan. And this was something we didn't know at the time, but apparently he was like, this was like the first gamble of Erwin's that we really got to see in the story, where it succeeded and they were able to capture the Female Titan for a little while anyway. And I think that was where I really started respecting him a lot, and like as a tactician and as a gambler. He really is a gambler, maybe more so than a tactician.
Yeah.
but yeah, like that was something I really, really enjoyed. And like in the Clash of the Titans arc, like just his badass, just losing his arm, but he keeps fighting, and like he keeps telling his the soldiers to fight on, advance, even though his arm was just bitten off. Like, crazy town. And then I think the Uprising arc was where I truly started appreciating his character, where he was part in staging the coup against the government, and also I think wasn't the Uprising arc also where we started getting a little bit of glimpse of his childhood and his father, and how his father was killed for potentially knowing a little too much, or for thinking things were in a certain way. That was really interesting, and we got to understand kind of what Erwin's dream was all along, was to prove his father to be right, to prove that to be correct, even though, I mean, he needed to get out into the outside world and prove his father's theory. Made me really enjoy his characters, and it made me understand him, and I mean, it made him out to be maybe not such a purely good guy, in the way that, is touched on how he more or less sacrificed countless lives to get to where he was. But I don't view him as a bad person for that, because especially I'd say because of his final assault on the Beast Titan, where he doesn't just send the recruits or the other soldiers into that death march. He actually joins them, knowing that this will lead to my death. And that was like that charge, and also the conversation with Levi leading up to it, like that whole thing together is such a powerful part, really emotional. And I think the fact that he didn't survive it, and the fact that he wasn't chosen to be rescued, like they saved Armin, all of that might make me enjoy his character as a whole maybe a little bit extra, because he didn't get to fulfill his dreams. And I think that bittersweetness kind of, it tickles me a little bit. So yeah,
I'm so glad someone put Erwin on here. Because I wanted to. I really did. I think I am a little biased because he's been dead for a while.
Fair, yeah.
In the story, and so he's not as fresh in my mind. And I really tried to freshen myself up somehow, without actually reading all the manga or watching the anime, because we were saving that for later podcasts. But at the end, he wasn't able to make it for me. I think I put him at 11. So
fair enough.
There goes my, the honorable mention thing. But I felt like Petter would mention him, so I could at least say something.
Good, smart thinking.
A little cunning of my say. But no, I think he's a fantastic leader. Very much a gambler, but he understands how to get people motivated, and basically the way to lead. There will be sacrifices, but he does it for the greater good of humanity, and obviously that comes with some philosophical reasoning. Well, is it the greater good of humanity if you have to sacrifice lives? Obviously that's debatable, but that makes Erwin's character more interesting, because while he himself believes he probably belongs in hell, figuratively speaking, he knows that, or he's fighting for what he believes in, fighting for his dream, as you mentioned. Yeah, I could see why so many people love him. And again, I understand why people wanted to see him survive versus Armin.
Right. And like, as I said, like, I kind of enjoyed like at the end of the day, I kind of enjoyed the fact that he didn't survive. But definitely in the moment, I was completely rooting for him to be saved there.
Yeah.
So yeah. Actually, I think I can predict your top 3. By the way.
Yeah, I was actually going to say that it's pretty obvious what my top 3 are going to be at this point.
At this point, yeah.
Seeing what I've said, you probably will guess the order too, but let's just go with it anyway.
Yes.
Armin is number 3. So speaking of that again, see, all this segues together.
Yeah, perfectly. It's strange. It just so happens. But by the way, real quick for anyone listening, we did not know each other's lists going into this. Like we don't know each other's lists. So yeah, this all, like, a lot of these are just coincidences.
What I loved about Armin is just seeing him come up with a plan and execute it. Usually he's kind of I wouldn't say he's a shy or a silent person, but he's not as outspoken as some of the other people, and it takes some confidence in him. to say anything. But when he does, he's like, boom, let's do this. Okay, we're gonna get on this elevator thing, and then we're gonna shoot all the Titans, and then we're gonna lure them in. Anyway, right. I love that moment in the first season. It's so great.
Yeah.
And there's other moments like that where he figures out where Reiner's hiding, right. And he ends up coming up with all sorts of plans. And yes, towards the end of the manga, he kind of had a lull where he struggled to be that, brilliant tactician. I think some of the situations that they were in were not, didn't lend for that. But I do think he still was able to show that tactician, smartness side by the end. And he was also able to show the other side of his character, the understanding side, that I don't know if we saw as much. Well, no, we saw that he was understanding even in the beginning of the story. And maybe he used that to his own credit, where he kind of tried to get Bertolt to talk in that one scene, if you remember.
Yeah.
But obviously, it became more of a plot factor later on in the manga, as he was able to get Zeke to look at life in a different way.
Well, I think his sense of thinking about how different people think and trying to understand other people, and really rather being pretty good at that, it's at least been a thing since the Uprising arc and with his character. Yeah. I would say, because then I remember there was a point where he kind of was questioning, why are we fighting? Are we only fighting because we have different beliefs?
Right.
And that's definitely, somewhat along the lines of trying to understand the other side, kind of.
Mm-hmm. And that kind of leads to just how thoughtful he is. He's not necessarily just take it as it is. He does think about these sort of things philosophically in some aspects.
Right.
And I think that makes him a very well-rounded character. He's not just one note.
Mm-hmm. Oh, for sure.
I feel like.
I agree. Absolutely.
And then just one other thing I'll mention about him, besides him and Annie being just so precious, and I love it, is that he's very human. He has these insecurities that we see throughout the manga, where he was kind of upset that he was always being protected by Mikasa and Eren, or that he wasn't in the same level as they were in some aspects, at least physically speaking. But he found ways that he could help, but he still kind of struggled with that self-loathing. And by the end, he even had a moment where he was just yelling at himself. It's like, I hate you. Why are you like this?
Yeah.
And I don't know. I think that speaks a lot to people, in that sometimes we have those moments where we look at ourselves and our insecurities and just, why are you like this? Yeah. Why can't you be better?
Yeah, I remember I was really moved by that scene with him.
Yeah, indeed. But he just kind of walks away from that and is able to talk to Zeke. And so it's interesting to see, one moment he's yelling at his insecurities, and then the next he's, pontificating with Zeke. So understanding that we as human beings have kind of wavelengths in that sense, but also that even though we are struggling with certain things, we can still try to help others, and maybe still move forward in our lives.
Yeah, I think we can learn a lot from Armin. Honestly, he's a wise guy.
Yeah.
All right then, number 2 for me is Grisha Yeager.
Okay, I was wondering who number 2 would be. I was like, okay.
Yeah.
It could be Jean.
It could have been.
Could it be?
I mean.
Could it be Connie? I was like, it's Connie.
That's funny.
And so, yeah, the only other one I could think of was Grisha. So.
Yeah. So yeah, Grisha. I cosplayed as Grisha last year.
Oh.
but that's not related to this.
Oh.
but I do think I pulled him off very well, if I do say so myself. But anyway, onto his character, why I love him so much. So one of the reasons, or one thing that I think is kind of neat about how his story is told in Attack on Titan, is that it's really told throughout the manga, little by little. At the very beginning, he doesn't really have much of a character, obviously. He's just in like the first 2 chapters, or maybe just the first chapter. I can't exactly remember, but and he's just this mysterious father. He has a key to the basement, and it's like, whoa, what's that? But it's like, it's just a mystery with like nothing. We don't know anything. Then, so I thought that was really interesting. I remember I used to have theories that he might be the Colossal Titan, although that doesn't really make much sense. But I do remember having those sorts of thoughts way back. But then at the end of the Uprising arc, we got some information from Shadis when he talked to him and learned some about how he found Grisha outside the walls, and he took Grisha into, brought him inside the walls. And that was when, obviously we got some more answers there, but we also sort of got even more mystery to his character with those reveals. And it intrigued me even more about his character then. Until, of course, we got to his more or less full backstory that we got from the basement reveal, which is easily one of my favorite parts of the entire manga. Learning all of that and getting to see Marley for the first time, and getting to see Grisha growing up there and his tragedy with his sister, and joining the Eldian restorationists, and all of that was really, really fascinating to me, and made me really, I sympathized a lot with him at that time. Obviously this whole part of the story was told from Grisha's perspective, so it's a little bit sugar-coated, I suppose, or like he conceals some of the worst sides of himself, which makes sense. But nevertheless, I still really, really enjoy that part of his story about his character. And at that point, we think we know everything there is to know about him, or the first time rereading through, we think so, but no, absolutely not. Because there's 2 more batches of more information to get from him even later on in the story, which is, like, as I said at the beginning of this, like, it's really sprinkled throughout the entire manga pretty much. Like, we get to know more and more about him. The next thing was through Zeke's backstory, where we get to know how terrible of a father he was to him, which is pretty much unforgivable how he treated Zeke. Or it is unforgivable, I would say, how he did that. It was absolutely dreadful. And then after that, we, when Eren and Zeke were in paths and they went through Grisha's old memories, we got to learn that he did learn from his mistakes of, from when he was raising Zeke. He was a great father to Eren, and he really regretted what he had, how he had treated Zeke. So while that doesn't excuse him, or like, it does definitely, I definitely don't think it does. But it is nice to at least see that he regrets it with his whole heart, the way we saw him do, and also as proof of that, as proof of him having bettered himself, he actually was a good father to Eren. He was a very good father to Eren. It's just a really sad thing that Zeke never got to have that.
Right.
So I would say, I guess Grisha is very far from a perfect human being, but that's probably why I love him as much as I do. As a fictional character.
Yeah, very, very complicated.
Definitely.
I guess like father, like son in that case.
So true. Both of the sons.
Yeah, both the sons. Yeah, very true. But Grisha's one that could have easily made my top 10, if not my honorable mentions.
Right.
But I think that for sure, he's one of those mysteries in the anime, along with, or in the story, along with the basement and everything.
Yeah.
And so finally getting some closure for that at one point, and then even getting more as we go forward, was really a treat. And yeah, I agree that his struggle was so fascinating to watch. Tragic with his sister and his first wife, Dina. Is that her name?
Dina or Dinah. I think the anime pronounced it Dinah, but.
Gotcha, Dinah. And yeah, just to see all that, but then the eventual closure that he has with Zeke was beautiful, but also the struggle that he had with basically Eren pushing him towards stealing the founding Titan and all that.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
You sympathize with him more and realize that at that point he's making the choice, but he's also kind of forced into this because Eren's telling him that this is the only way.
Right.
So you really feel for him in that moment.
Definitely.
Especially after working so hard to basically live a better life within the walls, being a better father and everything. And then he has to do all this that could potentially lead to Eren's death. Yeah. Anyway, it's really tragic.
It really is. Like that chapter 121, I think it is, where we saw Grisha, down in the crystal catacombs with the Rice family. That chapter is still easily in my top 3 of chapters in Attack on Titan.
So
ever.
Good.
Like it's definitely not below 3rd spot. Might be higher than 3, but it's definitely there, way up there for me.
Yeah, and I guess that again perfectly segue into my number 2.
Of course,
Eren Yeager, the son.
Yes,
the second son.
Right.
So, like you mentioned earlier about Eren, you mentioned people found him annoying, and to an extent, there was times where I did kind of find him a little whiny, but I did like how he would always try to push forward. And when he first got the Titan form and he was able to seal, well, was that the first time? Well, eventually he sealed up the hole in Trost, right?
Yes.
That was the first time he transformed?
No.
Or at least that was later on. They came back and did that?
Right. Yes.
Anyway, just that moment of him carrying the boulder and placing it down, it was kind of just sparking a new chapter in humanity's struggle to, fight the Titans. Was so powerful, and his, tatakae, tatakae there was so strong.
Yeah.
And so just that the younger Eren, just passion and his growth, and there were moments where he was very down on himself. And maybe that was a bit much, but I still found it endearing, and I felt like I knew who he was and what he strived for, and I respected that, especially with his story with his mom. I mean, that first chapter just ingrains him so much in my mind as a character I want to support, as a character I want to see towards the end. And yes, to have that was great. But then obviously his character goes through a little bit of a change in the Marley arc, at least from that point on. He kind of puts on this edgy tough guy kind of persona, maybe even emo, you could say. And for a while I wasn't really into it. The Marley arc Eren was okay. Like, I understand where he was coming from. I could tell he had been through a lot. So I kind of gave it a pass, but I actually really did enjoy chapter 100 and that moment where he kind of fights back against Marley when they declare war. But then you get into the War for Parity arc, and he's just all emo, and then the table scene. It's like, this isn't Eren. Who is this? Like, he's going with Zeke's plan that I didn't agree with.
Right.
It's like, this is not right. What is going on? And then, of course, we have the moment in Paths with Ymir, where we finally see I feel like we see the real Eren again. And then the rumbling happened, so I was very confused.
Yeah. Yeah, it was a wild ride.
It was a wild ride, and I think Isayama was still true to his character by revealing that this was all for his friends, for the future that he believed was the only way that they'd be able to survive and live. Or at least the only ones he could see.
Yeah.
And I think it emphasized that this story is one of tragedy and complexity that you don't get from other series. It's not cut and dry. But I appreciate what he tried to do, and I feel he did a good job in, him being Isayama, in creating a complex character who has so much on his shoulder, but sees it through to the end, even if it means becoming the enemy.
Yeah. a fantastic main character for this story.
Yeah, unlike main characters who are entirely good and just, Eren became this deeply troubled yet determined character who was basically a slave to his fate. And it's ironic for someone who's so passionate about freedom and fighting to be a slave, basically.
Oh yeah.
To that, and that made that moment in 138 and 139 where he's finally kind of released of that.
Yeah.
Special. It's very sad that he had to kill 80% of the world, and I know people get hung up on the fact that he says he would have done it anyway, even if he knew that he wasn't going to be stopped. But I don't think he wanted to do it. I don't think unless maybe he said I wanted to do it. I think he maybe did say that. But I don't think he took pride in doing it. I don't think he wanted to kill these people per se.
Right.
I think that it was more of the messed up mindset and this whole time loop paradox thing I think was going on.
Yeah.
Is pushing him towards this moment.
Yeah, and if it could have been avoided, he was down to do that, as we saw when they went to Marley to try to solve it peacefully. They went to some big politicians gathering where everyone were speaking very poorly about the Paradisian Eldians, and that's when he left. He just
right.
This is a lost cause. This can't be solved this way. I have to go my own way. So at least he did give it a chance. He did try to go with his friends to try to solve it peacefully.
And it's not like he didn't have inner turmoil about it. He knows he can't be forgiven, and even before that, he's kind of lets his heart out to Mikasa in a way, saying, I mean, he doesn't come out and say it, but I to me it feels, I mean, there's two parts to it, but one part of it is that I have this thing that's going to happen in the future that I have to do, but I desperately don't want to. I want there to be another way, or at least a way out of this. At least that's how I felt in that same chapter.
Yeah.
But anyway, Eren's is a fascinating, tragic character. I feel bad for you not having a happy ending, but at the same time, with the choices he made, there was no possible way there could be a happy ending for him.
Exactly. But yeah, still great stuff though. So that actually segues very nicely into my number one character, Hannes.
Oh my gosh.
No.
You gotta
be
kidding me.
Just kidding. It's not Hannes.
I was like, how is he going to segue this?
No, I don't even know how Hannes was a good segue into that. No, it's obviously Reiner Brown. As anyone who's been watching this knows, especially you here big girls, we love Reiner Brown here. No, I'm sorry. I shouldn't do these double jokes. It's not even funny. As anyone who's been watching this legit now, as anyone
like, what is going on? Expectations destroyed.
Third time's the charm. I promise I'm not gonna josh anyone this time. As anyone who's been watching a lot of Titan Teatime knows, Reiner Brown. Reiner, my boy. He's my boy. So yes.
The man.
I sure took my time delivering that one. Whew. Anyway, I'm so sorry about
suspense.
that. No one was in suspense. Everyone probably already knew it anyway. It's not even exciting. I already know who your number one is going to be. I knew that from the start probably. Anyway, Reiner Brown. He, at the start of the story, he from what we knew then, he was this super cool kind of big brother kind of character. A lot of people, a lot of the other guys kind of looked up to him as, he was a strong, really kind guy. He would always help his friends and just really admirable bloke, And he was funny too, as we said, he had this funny sense of humor. One of my funniest Reiner gags ever is always going to be the one from the Trost arc it's right before that time when they're shooting the Titans in the eyes in the basement.
Oh,
he's
yeah.
like, when they're walking down the stairs there, he's like, oh, don't you know the other weak spot of the Titans? It's up their ass. And Connie believes him. And it's so funny. It's so, Anyway, I love that kind of humor. I mean, as I also said at the beginning of this discussion about Magath and Zeke, kind of their thing. It's when Isayama does that kind of humor, kind of just out of the blue. That's when I laugh the most, because it's just comedic gold. Anyway, and as I also think I mentioned earlier a little bit, the big reveal that came for him and Bertold about them being the Colossal and Armored Titan came as a surprise to me. Absolutely, and it really flipped my whole view of Reiner upside down. Very much like Eren. Like I felt very much like Eren felt in that moment, where he, like, part of him didn't want to believe it, but he felt like so betrayed. Like, he had thought so highly of Reiner, and as had I. I didn't necessarily love him as a fictional character at that point, because there wasn't too much necessarily that was super interesting about him, other than he was just a really cool guy.
Sure.
So while he wasn't one of my favorite characters at that point in the story, he definitely was a character that I really enjoyed and that I thought was a really cool and nice guy to look up to. So I really felt Eren's pain when that reveal happened, and I just couldn't understand what could have driven Reiner and the others to think that they were justified in any of the stuff that they were doing, like destroying the walls and killing all the people that they were killing or / trying to kill. Like, at that point in the story, I was so confused, and I knew because this was because I experienced that reveal through the anime. So I started reading the manga after season 2, and I remember before I got into the manga, I remembered I think I knew some manga readers who did enjoy Reiner's character, and I just couldn't understand why. And like they felt bad for Reiner. I was like, how do you feel bad for Reiner? but very shortly after that, because I think Reiner's flashback childhood chapters had just recently come out in the manga at that time, and I caught up pretty much right around there, pretty much right after those had come out. So I very quickly caught up to that, and swiftly understood that, okay, yeah, he's relatable. Even this guy who I thought was such a bad character, even he is completely relatable, and I even felt for him more than I have felt for possibly any other fictional character, actually. I guess going back very briefly to return to Shiganshina, actually, where I remember I was rooting wholeheartedly for the Survey Corps in that battle.
Sure.
Because obviously that was before the Marley arc, and I think I probably wished they had killed Reiner. When they had the chance. When Hanji and Jean had the chance to kill him there. I was like, well, come on, hurry up, do it! Like, something's gonna go wrong, and obviously it did. But I wanted him to die there, just because I viewed him as the villain, like one of the worst villains at that point in time. But then, as I said, then came the Marley arc, and oh boy, yeah, that was when I really fell in love with him, and getting to understand his perspective and knowing his life and everything that made him just really fascinating, and seeing him suffer made me sympathize with him. I think he was really the MVP of the Marley arc, and I'd probably say he was the main protagonist of the Marley arc as a whole, and I think he carried it splendidly. I mean, it is my favorite arc in the story, and I think he, as the main character of that arc, he's the main reason why that arc is as good as it is. Of course, there's many other factors as well. We talked about how crucial Willie Tiber was, and many other characters as well. But Reiner, I would say, is definitely the most important character to the Marley arc. Sadly, I guess after the Marley arc, he didn't get too much to do, but he did save the world. He was part of the group that saved the world. And he did get closure with his mother at the very end, which I thought was really, really needed, and something that I very much appreciated. It was just such an important thing to see, because obviously she's a controversial character herself, and I think, well, I choose to believe that she genuinely did have a change of heart and and saw the flaws in her ways, just like Grisha did as a parent. Because, well, first of all, I believe the words that she speaks to Reiner at the end, and also, as we touched on earlier a bit, Reiner does seem to be doing very, very well at the very end of the story there. I think Reiner mentally, even though he was messed up in the head during his days in the Survey Corps on Parody, growing up there, even though he was messed up there, definitely not in an ideal place mentally, I do think that he was still somehow feeling better then than he did when he got back home to Marley. I think that was his lowest. I mean, obviously we see he's contemplating suicide and stuff like that. So obviously he's in a very bad place when he's, after he got back to Marley. But he also lost weight, like a lot of weight when he, over the 4-year time skip. I don't have the numbers in front of me right now, but I do have I do have the guidebook, which came out before the Marley arc, and I have the character encyclopedia, which came out after the Marley arc, and both of those have little biography pages for Reiner, and you can see like the height and the weight. He grew a little bit, I think, over the time skip. Like he's a little taller, which makes sense. A 17-year-old to a 21-year-old.
Right.
Had grown a little bit, but his weight is much lower, and that's, I think, a clear sign of him just being just not feeling good. He's probably too depressed to have an appetite. So my point was kind of that while he was definitely not in an ideal state of mind while on Parody, I think he was still feeling better. Like comparing the two eras of Reiner, he was still feeling better, I think, considering his weight was better, and he was joking around and stuff, which he didn't do in the Marley arc, but he does after the final time skip, after those 3 years,
right,
where he's sniffing the letter and whatnot, which is just something I was so happy to see, and hopefully he's, after the time skip, hopefully and presumably he's in a better place even than he was while on Parody as a teenager. So yeah, I think while he could have probably had a better resolution to his character journey, I'm still very satisfied with it. I guess it could have been slightly better, but I loved it as it was, and primarily as for the Marley arc, but also his character journey as a whole, which is just really fascinating. With he starts as this really good guy, he becomes one of the worst villains imaginable, and then he becomes a good guy again.
Yeah.
So yeah, fantastic character. I'm sorry for
totally
talking to him about this so long, but he's my boy.
Yeah, well, he deserves it. And you mentioned he's relatable, and that's so true. I think, some of us have guilty feelings, or even just depression in general, and to see a character struggle with that, but basically, lack of a better word, overcome that.
Yeah.
And search out forgiveness eventually, and potentially learn to forgive himself, as I mentioned earlier, is very nice to see, and makes him endearing, I think.
Absolutely.
So I guess my number one.
Yeah.
Is pretty obvious. Mikasa Ackerman.
Yes.
I am number one Mikasa fanboy. No, I'm sure there's bigger fanboys than I am, but
you're up there though.
I gotta be up there, right? I've loved her since season 1, and not just really because of how cool she was. I mean, she was very cool and just a beast. I love how she just kicked butt so much. Was able to take down Titan so easily, flawlessly.
Yeah.
But it was the moment in the Trost arc where she loses Eren. Well, not even before she loses Eren, where she's having, or at least it realizes she loses Eren. She has the flashback of where they first meet, and then that whole scene. It's so powerful. Shocking.
Yeah.
Maybe a tad bit disturbing as well, but the lessons that she learned from that moment have ended up carrying with her entire life. And so I really appreciated that backstory for her. And then when she had believed Eren had died, she almost gave up. Like, it was after that backstory.
Yeah.
But then she decided to keep living so she could keep remembering him.
Right.
I love that concept. It turned out to be great. Good thing she didn't give up, because Eren comes basically to her rescue. Now, she said that in the Trost arc, but in the end, she does that basically after killing him. She keeps living so that she can keep remembering him.
Yeah.
It was a great callback to that moment, and it was a perfect tie-in, I felt like. So she keeps living so she can remember him.
Totally.
But I think those last 2 chapters, plus the final battle epicness, with Falco's wings behind her, that was great imagery.
Yeah. Yeah.
It sealed her place at number 1 for me. I loved overall her cruel but beautiful world theme. The ending to the season 1 anime is basically her song. Cruel but beautiful world, or whatever it is. And I don't know how many times I've listened to that song and just cried, because it's so sad and yet something beautiful about it. And especially after getting the ending that we got, it just ties it all together. And now whenever I listen to that song, I think of Mikasa, I think of Eren and their kind of tragic love story.
Yeah.
It's so powerful for me.
I totally get that.
So I know why people, or I understand why people don't like her. She's not always in the forefront. She's not this peppy moe girl. Yeah, she's not the typical waifu in that aspect, I guess. But she did everything she could do to protect the people she loved, especially Eren. And I think that is something. I feel like for what her character was, I think she did it fantastically, and I admire it. And that's something I loved about her. You don't have to be the tactician. You don't have to be the peppy person. You can still make an impact in the story, or even in people's lives, just by being there for them or fighting for them.
Yeah.
And keep moving forward and all that jazz.
Totally.
So yeah, and then finally, I just want to mention the kiss. It all ended up leading to that kiss, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
At least the Eren Mikasa stuff. And it was so sad, so tragic that she had to be the one that lopped off his head.
Yeah.
But it was so beautiful at the same time. Just bittersweet, like this, the most bittersweet thing I've ever. Well, one of the most bittersweet things I've ever read. I did just read To Your Eternity, so I can't really say it's the most bittersweet anymore. But
yeah, check out our To Your Eternity podcast on Umami Manga.
Yeah, check it out. But it's a little different.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And
yeah, I think if you're looking for a happy ending, this is not the manga for you, obviously. But for what he was going for with Mikasa's character and Eren's character, I'll add, I think it ended fantastically. Yeah. And Eren Mikasa forever, baby.
Sure. Yeah, totally.
Fanboy for life.
Yeah. Sweet. We made it through. This took longer than I thought it would. I thought this was gonna be a short episode.
My bad.
But hey, this was a lot of fun. Now we have some sort of definite top 10 lists that we have shared with the world. So yeah, I had a lot of fun with this.
I did too. Like you said, it was longer than I thought it would be, but it was nice to hear our in-depth thoughts on each character, to be honest.
Oh yeah.
I know we had talked about a few characters before, but to hear your full thoughts on a few of those was really, really refreshing, actually.
Nice, and likewise for you. I will apologize to all of the Levi fanboys and fangirls for not having him anywhere on my list, because I know there's a lot of people who love Levi, but sadly,
that's true.
He's not quite that high up for me. I still love him, of course, but yeah.
Well, hey, I had him on number 7, so we're okay.
Right. Oh yeah.
So I actually wanted to apologize for not having Erwin on my list anywhere. But thankfully, you did that for me already.
I got you covered.
We're good. You got me covered.
And another one that I felt a little bit bad for not including, which I know a lot of people have a lot of respect for, is Kenny Ackerman. he was.
Oh yeah, he's pretty popular.
He was really close to getting onto my honorable mentions, but had to kick him since we wanted to keep it to. I mean, we didn't want to keep it too long, so we kept it to 3 honorable mentions. So, but yeah, like he's also one that I have a lot of respect for. Just want to make that clear.
Awesome.
So I guess that's all for today. Again, if you're listening on YouTube where you can comment, please share your top 10 lists of your favorite Attack on Titan characters there. Always fun to see other people's takes on that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if you enjoy our content, you can follow us on Twitter at Umami Manga. If you like this episode, please share it around with anyone you think might enjoy it too. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you next time where we'll talk about our favorite Titans with Nasty of the Nasty podcast.
Yeah. By the way, don't forget to rate our podcast on whatever streaming podcast services you listen to.
Oh, yeah.
I think 5 is a very great number. You should consider that.
At least if it's 5 out of 5, then that's a great number.
Yeah. If it's a 5 out of 10, then I don't like that number.
True.
But
yes, that's very smart to say. Yeah, because we are on most podcast platforms as well as on YouTube. If you're listening on YouTube, please subscribe.
Please.
We don't usually go through this, but this is probably a good routine to go through. But yes, with all that said, thank you again for listening. See you next time. Bye.
See you later.